Time is the Simplest Thing by Clifford, Simak is set in a world where humanity have given up their pursuit of interstellar travel by conventional means, mostly because the problems facing them are too great to overcome. So things like asteroid belts, radiation, and the fuel economy. But humanity have started to develop these telepathic powers, and an organisation has become established which are harnessing these telepaths in order to project their minds into the distant stars to explore new worlds. This organisation is known as Fishhook, and they have set up this enormous facility to harness the power of these telepaths and employ them to go out and seek new technologies, new beings, and new materials. And this organisation, Fishhook, their facility, has been set up in the only country that was really willing to listen to them and go along with their plan, which is Mexico. So we follow a character named Shepard Blaine, who is one of these telepaths living and working in this Fishhook facility in northern Mexico. Right at the beginning of the book, he is on one of these mental projections to a distant desert planet. And he's exploring the planet, coming to the end of his half-an-hour time limit, and he stumbles upon a strange building. And when he enters this building, he finds himself in a completely blue room, and in the centre of this room is this sprawling pink gelatinous mass. And through his telepathic abilities, he senses that this is actually a living being, a conscious entity. And suddenly, before his time limit runs out and his mind is transported back to Earth, the being latches onto his mind and part of its consciousness is transferred into his own. So when he comes kind of back to his own mind and body in the Fishhook facility on Earth, he now has this other being residing in his mind. And supposedly this is something that can happen to employees of Fishhook, and they refer to it as going alien. And apparently there are a few different ways that you can go alien, but it is highly frowned upon, and you are punished quite severely if this happens, because there's a fear that you have become something other than human, and they don't want you going back out into society with some kind of alienness attached to your mind. So to counteract this and try and prevent it, Fishhook employs these telepaths that are specifically there to read the minds of others and to try and eke out any of these mental corruptions. And these telepaths are known as peepers. And so the main character here, Shepard Blaine, realises pretty early on that he has to go on the run, because if he's caught, he'll be subjected to some kind of severe punishment. So that's really what the book is about. He's on the run, trying to avoid these peepers, trying to avoid Fishhook, encountering strange members of society in a world which very much looks down upon these telepaths. And Simak makes a really clumsy comparison between them and the oppressed Jewish populations of Europe during World War II, which was just really badly done. And that leads into a general clunkiness that persists throughout Time is the Simplest Thing, where Simak will often be drawing some kind of parallel or creating some kind of metaphor, and rather than letting you as the reader figure it out for yourself and digest it, he will just signpost what he's doing with big flashing lights and just tell you, here's what I'm doing. And it's a really frustrating reading experience because it feels like he's not respecting your intelligence as the reader and letting you come to your own conclusions. For example, the main theme of the book, I suppose, is where is the boundary between man and alien? When are you still a human? When have you become something other? And Simak just tells you what he's doing there and points it out really clearly for all to see. There's also the organisation Fishhook itself. He just tells you why it's called fishhook, because they're reaching into the distant stars to fish for these new technologies, materials, and concepts. And again, I just feel like that was very, very obvious, and he didn't need to do that. So there were a number of these moments that I found really frustrating. And on top of that, for the most part, when he's on the run for the bulk of this novel, things are just really slowly plodding along. They get very boring, and I don't think it builds to a satisfying conclusion. So overall, I really didn't like Time is the Simplest Thing, which is a shame because earlier this year, I did read City, which was excellent, and it feels like this was written by an entirely different author. But if I did have to say one positive thing about it, that pink blob alien entity is quite unique and interesting and was the best part of the book by far. And so I put coincidence in the title of this video because the next book that I went to from a completely different shelf, completely at random and without any prior knowledge of its contents, was The Demolished Man by Alfred, which I have this Penguin science fiction edition of with a cover that I really don't like and quite an unfortunate quote plastered just under the title there. And this book is also about telepaths. It follows a man who owns and runs an enormous corporation named Ben Reich, and he is falling behind his competitor, and he decides that the best course of action is to actually murder his competitor, which is really difficult in a world populated by telepaths because they will just see you coming and they will read your mind and determine what your plans are. So there hasn't been a murder for generations in this world. So he has to use his money and his status to come up with a plan of how he's actually going to kill this other man who will be very heavily guarded because he is also extremely rich, successful, and notorious. And I say it's a coincidence that I picked this book up next because not only are there telepaths in the book, there are people that specifically read minds that are known as peepers. So clearly this book had a huge influence on Simak and on Time is the Simplest Thing, which I'm not necessarily knocking Simak for because Bester, you can feel his influence throughout science fiction. But this just made me realise how bad Time is the Simplest Thing is, because this, by comparison, is just so much better. The writing is so much sharper, it's wittier, it's funnier, the characters are more memorable. And I really enjoyed it because basically what you've got here is Ben Reich facing off against a telepathic detective who I think is called Lincoln Powell, and they are engaged in this battle of wits, trying to stay one step ahead of each other. And it's set in a world that is really fascinating because it is in the far future, so things are quite different. And the other thing that Bester does here is write in a really experimental way, which is what I found when I read The Star's My Destination, because when people are communicating telepathically, those moments are italicized, and that's done in Time is the Simplest Thing as well, so there's another kind of parallel. And there are also kind of mental images that can be projected alongside these thoughts, which do often lead to moments that are quite funny, but there are almost these patterns of thoughts that come through these telepaths' minds. So you can kind of see there how some of the text is structured, which makes for a really interesting reading experience. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. I think I prefer The Star's My Destination, but the penultimate chapter of this is exceptionally good. I think the more that I read Bester, the more I can see and feel his influence on the genre as a whole. And I've read 3 books from him now, and I've not been disappointed once. So that's everything for today. Thank you very much for watching, liking, and subscribing. I'm coming up on 500 subscribers now, which is really amazing. So thank you very much if you are subscribed, and if you're not already, please do so because there's going to be many more videos to come. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.